Hi, finally figured out my technical difficulties, and here I am. This is our very first live Fit and Bendy Q&A session. I am joined by my stretching assistant, Betty Boop, who wants to show you her toy. I have a whole list of questions here to answer today, and I'm going to do my best. Given that, obviously to really answer a lot of these in detail, I would need to know you better and know what you're working on and look at your bodies in more detail. So I'm going to give you some pretty general answers to a lot of these questions. And if you want to follow up with me in the future and work more closely, obviously I would be happy to do that. Always enjoy it. So where to start? And also I have I think I've enabled you to ask questions live if you want follow-up. I'm still figuring out the Google Hangout, so bear with me. Stretching, yes. Technology, I'm doing my best. All right. So the first question is for Diane, and Nina said she also has the same problem. Diane McGrath and Nina Ivanovic. And the question is, when they are extended to the side, a straddle leg lift or kick, there's an awful crunching, popping sound in the hip. So I'm hesitant to give you much of a detailed answer on this because there are a number of different things that can cause crunching and popping in the hip. Thank you, that's very helpful. Really, if this is something that's causing you pain and is an ongoing problem, I definitely would recommend that you see a doctor about it or see a physical therapist. But often what happens with the hip joints is if over a lifetime of overstretching the joint and stretching it in the wrong way, instead of the femur sitting happily in the hip socket like this and like moving nicely, the connective tissue that holds the head of the femur in place starts to get stretched out. And once that connective tissue, that ligament stretches, it never goes back. So it's like an elastic band that's shot that doesn't snap back anymore. So then the femur sometimes doesn't sit quite exactly where it should. And sometimes when it's rotating in the hip socket, especially in the side and outer rotation, it'll kind of go. Sometimes this is just, something that you have to live with and it's not that bad, but it can get worse if you don't pay attention to it. And usually what I recommend for people who are having problems where the hip is popping or there's catching or pain is you do a lot of hip stabilization and strengthening. So strengthening the external rotators and the hip extensors, all of these muscles on the outside of the hip and in the back of the leg here. And like I said, for more specifics on exactly what's going on with your hip, you should find someone who can work with you with your body if this is something that's really bothering you. Moving on. Next question is from Tamara. First stretches for the hamstring and bendy body. That's the Bendy Body DVD. You say to have a slight arch in the back, but mine wants to be flat. So yes, what position are you supposed to be in when you're stretching your hamstrings? So normally in the DVD, I have you guys stretching your hamstrings on your back, which I think is one of the most effective ways to get all the muscles in the back of the leg. But I'm going to show it to you for a point of illustration, kneeling. So let's see if I can adjust this camera just a little bit. Can you see me? Yes. All right, so I'm going to stick my leg out in front of me. Now, it's much easier to round down over the leg. You'll find if you tuck your pelvis under and you get a little bit of rounding in the spine here, you can get your forehead a lot closer to the leg. But the problem with that is when my pelvis is tucked, I'm not getting the very top of the hamstring to stretch. So what you want to do instead is think of sticking your butt out just a little bit. Now, when we think of arching the back, it's a lot easier to arch the back from the upper back, so you can bring the chest up. But really, this is more of an extension through the lower back, just sticking out your butt. And it can be a very small movement. You don't want to think about like a really big lordotic butt in the air arch. It's just a small with the booty, sticking the booty out. And you'll feel as soon as you do that, that the stretch goes all the way up the back of the leg, all the way up into your glutes, into your butt. But I may not get down as far. So if I'm all the way down here with my back rounded, once my butt's sticking out, I'm getting much deeper stretch, but I won't go down as far. Now, if you're lying on your back, let's see my helper here. If I'm lying on my back, the way that translates I'm not sure if you can see me here, it's kind of black on black. I apologize for that. But if I am tucking my pelvis under, this leg is gonna come up much higher. My butt's kind of off the floor, but I'm gonna be able to get that leg all the way up. But I'm skipping the top part of this hamstring. So when I go to stretch the hamstring, I'm just gonna very slightly arch in the back. And it's just that natural arch. If you're just laying there like you're reading a book at the beach, you've got a slight arch in your lower back here. Almost everybody's gonna have that. So you just wanna maintain that natural arch. Again, it's not a big arch and it's not in the chest. You're not allowing your chest to pop up. It's just a tiny little with the booty, sticking the booty down into the floor. And you'll feel as soon as that happens, my leg isn't gonna come all the way up, but I'm gonna start to get that stretch right up into the connected point. And if you're really tight in here, then at first, that might feel like a real tight area because you're used to stretching with the hips tucked. So your hips are gonna want to tuck because that's gonna get your leg up higher, but don't worry about getting your leg up higher. Just try to feel that little drop in the hips that's gonna allow you to get the stretch all the way up next to the hip joint. All right, question number 3 for Georgiana. She is having difficulty with bridge wheel pose and pushing up into that position. So what could be holding you back? She said not strong enough arms or shoulders, or is it an issue of quads or back muscles? So if you're trying to push up into your bridge or wheel and you feel like you just can't get your body off the ground, there are a lot of different things that could be contributing to that. Part of it is just if you're really super tight. If your hips are tight, if your shoulders are tight, and if your back is tight, then the ability of your body to make that curved position, to have both your hands and your feet on the floor and your body arched up like that, might still be, out of the range of your range of motion. So you have to stretch your shoulders, stretch your hips, stretch your back in different positions. You can do cobra, you can do lots of lunges, you can do a shoulder stretch against the wall, and all of those things will start to open up your body so that you can become more flexible to be able to achieve that position. Now, in terms of strength, maybe you're able to achieve that position, like if you're bending backwards over a Pilates ball or someone's supporting you, but on your own, you're collapsing. If that's the case, then the muscles that you are going to really want to try to find are the ones in your upper back and in your lower abs and your glutes, because those are going to help to tuck the pelvis to open up the hips. And the upper back is really one of the most important areas in supporting your body in bridge. A lot of times people try to push their arms straight from their shoulders. So you imagine if I'm upside down, I'm trying to push with my shoulders are in here and I'm pushing from there. I'm gonna have a really hard time then opening up the shoulders to get into the right position, because the correct position, I'm fully extended here. So if I'm pushing here, that's just never gonna happen. So you wanna try to engage through the upper back. And a good stretch for this, I'm not quite close enough to the wall here, but imagine I have a wall behind me, is to lean back and put your hands on the wall and try to push the wall away from you. And then feel that the push is being initiated from your upper back and the arms are extending from the upper back, this engagement through here. And instead of pushing like you're doing a handstand push-up or something, it's really shouldery. See if that helps. Really work on the upper back strength. That was what I would recommend the most. For Isabel, lovely Isabel. Isabel sent me a picture. When Isabel's in her splits, the back leg is going across the body. Now, this is a really common problem. You are not alone, Isabel, that when your back leg is extended, that it kind of goes off at a little bit of an angle across the body. Now, if you have hardwood floor or mat, you can use the edge of the mat to line up. And what you want to have is to have the leg going straight back here. And if it's going across the body, usually it's because the hip is opening out. You can see if my hip starts to open out and my hip isn't square, it's going to make the leg come across the body. It's going to make the leg open out. Now, to fix that, you want to think about engaging through that. I like to call it the downstairs butt. It's the area right where your hamstring and your butt cheek come together. You want to engage that muscle and use it to push the hip down and forward. And that pushing the hip forward will help you find the correct position with your leg. Maybe don't go down as far into the split as first. At first use some yoga blocks or something to support your body. Come up a little higher. Work on squaring the hips, bringing that back hip forward. Use that rotation to move the back leg out so that your legs are in a straight line, not going across the body. Then holding in that position, start to sink down. All right, try that out. Very common problem though. Samantha has a few questions. Samantha Allen, let's see. How to straight legs in your back bend. I'm assuming you mean straightening the legs in your bridge position. Very few people are flexible enough to have completely straight legs with the hands in close. So what I would recommend is put your hands a little bit further away. And so the position that she's talking about, and my back is not warmed up, so I'm not going to demonstrate this one, is when your legs are completely straight, you make sort of a teardrop shape. And this is a deep upper back stretch. All right. So it's easiest to start with the hands a little further away and really work, again, just like I said in the last wheel tip, to really work on using those upper back muscles to push and extend into the upper back. A lot of people focus too much on the legs, but the real trick is the upper back. It's the opening of the upper back and the shoulders and getting this armpit fully open. So you want to make sure that your armpits are rotated inward so that they're facing in the same direction your face and not looking out at the wall to the side of you, but straight forward. And then squeeze with the muscles underneath your shoulder blades to move that arm back. And then you'll start to move the armpits past your hands and the legs can straighten. If you just think about straightening a leg, straightening a leg, straightening legs, you're missing the beauty of that position, which is the opening up in the upper back. So focus more on that and the legs will straighten on their own as the upper back opens up. Just don't put the hands too close to the feet. It would be really difficult. Second question for dear Samantha. Always wanted to, have an Ask Ann Landers or something like that. She the question and answer person that you wrote to in the newspaper? I don't remember. I'm sure someone can comment on that for me. Standing leg holds, standing split, where you kick your leg up and you catch it in front of you. How can you do that? So if you are flexible enough so that you can do your split and you can lean forward and lay on your leg, then you are also flexible enough to do that standing. Why is it so much harder standing? Because it takes a ton of muscle. So to be able to do that, you need to work on your muscles, your active flexibility. Your active flexibility is your ability to hold your body in a flexible position instead of just allowing gravity or an external force to push you into that position. So I would say, I'm not going to be able to do this here because the camera's too low, but imagine that I'm standing up. You just want to work on the standing leg, because usually where the standing splits fail is because the standing leg isn't strong enough. So get that standing leg completely straight. You want to engage through the knee. You want to lift out of your hip. So you're lengthening through that hip and standing up really tall, and don't let that standing leg bend. Then you bring the knee of the active leg in, grab the ankle, and start to extend it. And at first you might get to here and the standing leg will start to bend and you're going to fall over. So that's what you work on at first. You just work on keeping that standing leg straight and just work on that, work on that. Now, once you have the strength in the standing leg, you can start to extend the active leg and bring it up and in. But the standing leg, the strength in the standing leg is what you need to start with. And question number 3, side tilt. Side tilt is pretty challenging. And so again, for standing splits of any kind, whether it's front or the side tilt is going to be the standing middle split, where your body is tilted over to the side and you're in basically a middle split with no floor. In order to be able to do that, you're not going to, stretching your middle splits is fine, but if you have your middle splits, you're flexible enough. The important thing is to develop the strength. So the best way of doing that is to strengthen these outer rotators. It's a lot of external rotation, the outside of the hips. It's also a lot of obliques because you have to be able to hold your body as the leg comes over. So you can start bringing that leg up. So you start in a side split, side standing split. Just start to lean it down, lean it down, lean it down, lean it down, lean it down. And just like with the straight standing split, there's going to be a lot of falling over at first. You've got to get that foundation in. But don't think of this as something that is a stretch. It's really more of an exercise. It's a strength. Standing splits are more about strength than they are about flexibility. The flexibility of doing a split is necessary, but then to go beyond that, more stretching isn't going to help you get it. It has to be about building the strength. And the best way to practice it is just to, best way to get it is just to practice it. You practice and practice and practice. And you just hold the leg up and you start to tilt. You start to tilt, sticking your butt out to the side. But yeah, think of it more as a strengthening thing than looking for other stretches that you need to do. For Rose Lee, pelvis, hip flexors, glutes are very tight. Stretches or strengthening exercises for the psoas and the downstairs butt. My dear friend, the downstairs butt. She just ordered Bendy Body. Yes, so most of what I would recommend for opening up the hip, my favorite exercises are on the Bendy Body DVD. So if you ordered that, you're well on your way. But just a brief overview. When you're in a lunge, the body's desire is to allow the pelvis to drop and the hip to open. This feels very comfortable. However, it's not going to stretch those deep hip flexors, the really, really tight spots in the hip. So you can do this all day, but it's not going to get into those tight muscles that you're talking about. So what you want to do is try to stretch your hips with your hips in square. So that means using your downstairs butt, that's this connector muscle right beneath the butt, to push the back hip forward, then the lower abs lift your pubic bone up and forward, and then you go into lunge. You can see I'm not going nearly as deep, but I'm getting a really deep stretch. The stretch is all the way through the front of the hip. It's really deep. It's that psoas, it's the deep hip flexors that can get really tight and grippy. And doing that repeatedly at first, it almost might feel more like a strengthening exercise than a stretch, because the lower abs and the downstairs butt are two muscle groups that tend to be neglected in our strengthening. And they tend to be a little weak compared to how tight and strong that hip flexor is. But the more often that you do the lunge in the correct position and really squeeze that downstairs butt, squeeze those lower abs, really lift, try to keep the pelvis in alignment, more often you do that, the stronger those muscles get, the more the hip flexor will be able to lengthen and relax. And you'll really be able to make the most of those lunges instead of just relaxing down from, which feels lovely but isn't the most useful in terms of getting those deep muscles. So that's definitely what I recommend for those, for stretching out the hips. For ST shimmy, working towards the needle scale. What exercise you should be doing after the back bending piece of the Fit and Bendy DVD. So I'm assuming you have the Get Bent DVD. Usually skip the splits part because you do that as part of your warm up and cool down. So I believe that you are being held back by the fact that you are not stretching your splits before you are practicing your needle scale. People think of needle scale as a back flexibility thing, and to a certain extent it is, but it's really a hip flexibility, shoulder flexibility thing. So I mean, when you think about a needle scale, it's basically a split catch ankle. So it's split while you're holding your foot behind your head. So it definitely requires some back flexibility. But a lot of that is that hip. It's the ability to do the split really deeply. So don't cut the splits out of your warm-up. Do the splits. And when you're in the splits, work a lot on lifting out of the hips. So think about going backwards. You don't necessarily have to do a back bend in your splits, but you want to think about opening up that hip flexor as much as possible. The more open your hip flexor, the easier it will be to do the needle scale. The other thing to work on is really opening up the shoulder. So when you first get into that needle scale, at the beginning, all you're working on is just straightening your arms. Don't even think about straightening the back leg. Just think about straightening your arms. If you can get your arms straight, it's just a little to get the leg straight. But getting the arms straight in the beginning is one of the most important things. So go back and do your splits with your back bending. So do splits first and back bending. In fact, I always recommend doing splits, and if you do over splits, doing over splits before you train your back, because so much of back bending is actually hip stretching. And if your hips are very tight and you haven't warmed them up, you're going to end up putting a lot of pressure on your lower back, because this will be tightening in here. If this is tight, this is short, then I end up with this sort of lordotic curve. I'm hyperextended here. This is gripping, and all of the bend is happening just right in that lower back. And the problem with that is that over time, it's going to really compress the spine and it's going to be very cranky for your back. So I highly recommend doing the splits. And then as you start to get more flexible, and I have no idea where you are in this process right now, but you can start working on the split catch ankle, which is where you'll be in the split, bend your knee, grab your ankle, and try to straighten your leg. So that would be the next step on what to work on for those. Alrighty, for Georgiana has another question. That's wonderful. Unable to put my heels down in downward dog or in deep side lunge. Is it possible that my Achilles tendons are just unable to do that? I don't know. I don't know how long you've been working on it or if you have any problems. I mean, there are some people who have problems in their ankles and in their tendons that are just incredibly tight, or there's like some sort of injury or scar tissue there. But in general, I would say work on doing some active flexibility stretches for your, and basically you're just talking about being able to get a better flex in your foot, right? So active flexibility would be just pulling that foot back as far as you can. Pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, and relax. And pull, 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 and relax. And you do that on both sides. You do 10 to 15 on each side, starting to use the muscles to open up that calf and open up the back of the heel. And you can also pull and just give it a little help, a gentle help, pull, and a little bit of gentle help, and do that on both sides. And sometimes you'll find that when the foot is sickled, it feels tighter, or when it's beveled. So sickled means the foot is flexed and slightly turned in. Beveled, it's flexed and slightly turned out. So you can stretch it that way as well. You can do some circles, but a lot of times the feet can get tight if you spend a lot of time standing, a lot of time wearing heavy shoes or something like that. And if you've done that for a long time in your life, the feet can just be really, the range of motion of the feet can be really limited. But I have seen people really improve the range of motion of the feet. So I would say just put some energy as possible and using the muscles in the feet to move them. Passive stretching, when a muscle is really tight like that, it feels like it's just not moving. The passive stretching, just kind of trying to relax into it, sometimes is just not going to yield you the results that you want. So try the active moving it. All right. My head getting cut off. I need to hunch down. I'm gonna have a better setup next time. A little bit last minute this time. For Nina, is there a correlation between having a poor middle split and a great straddle forward bend? Not that I know of. No. It's just, you know, that's just going to have to do with the way that your hips are structured and where it's tight, where it's loose, and everybody's different. Melissa, newbie splitter, long time runner. Any stretches in particular, stretches that I should do to counteract tightening of the muscles from doing a lot of long distance running? Runners do tend to be tight, and it's going to be a little different for different people. But in general, that flexing and pointing of the feet that I was just doing is really good, because the feet tend to get really tight, the feet and ankles and calves. So we're opening those up. Also that hamstring stretch. And I have noticed that a lot of times runners have difficulty getting their legs really engaged and really straight, because everything is always slightly bent when you're running. So if you're lying on your back, work on just straightening that leg fully. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze the muscle and kneecap and lift that leg up, and then bend, and then straighten it. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze that muscle right there. Get that leg completely straight as you can, and bend. And also holding that leg up, and you can flex and point the foot. So again, this is active flexibility, where you're not pulling on the leg so much as using your own muscles to start to open that up. There's a whole sequence around that in the Bendy Body DVD if you're interested. But I would focus on the active flexibility, and then that lunge will be good too if you tend to have really tight quads and the hip flexors are really tight. You know, I know a lot of people love running. I mean, not so much, but I know people love it. It will tighten you up. So what I would recommend is that before you run, do a really good active flexibility warm up. And then after you run, before your body cools down, you can do some passive stretching, touching your toes, do some lunges, and make use of the fact that your body's all warm and juicy to counteract some of the tightening effects of running. One other tip, and I don't know if you have this option, is just to not run on pavement, because pavement is really hard when you're running on that unyielding surface. Beep, 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 beep. What stretches, also for Melissa, what stretches are best to help with turnout at the hips, especially with straight legs? Used to be pigeon toe, just corrected, strains my hips and knees, and this is a bad, you need to stop sort of way. Well, if your hips and knees are saying this is bad, you need to stop, there might be some sort of injury or imbalance, or sometimes the way that your hips are formed doesn't allow for a huge range of motion and a lot of turnout, especially for middle splits for certain people. I don't know if that's you or not, but if it's not you, and if it's just something where you need to work on building strength, there are a lot of exercises that you can do for turnout. A very simple one that I really like is just to sit in your straddle, and you just sit in your straddle, and you put both arms out to the side, and you try to sit up as tall as you can. Now, if you have some tightness in your lower back and you're a little bit hunched in this position, you're not able to sit up tall, just go ahead and put a cushion under your butt so your butt's a little elevated, and that will help you be able to sit up taller. And then flex your feet and try to slide your feet back towards the wall behind you. It helps if you do it with like socks and you're on a slippery floor, so you might actually be able to get a little actual motion, but the actual ability to slide the feet back isn't as important as feeling the engagement. You can feel it right in the outside of your butt, where the butt and the outside of the leg come together. If this is the downstairs butt here, I call this the wraparound porch of the butt, the turnout muscles. So they're right around here, and you want to focus on feeling those muscles and using them and sliding the feet back, and just sit there and hold it until the muscle starts to shake and engage it, and then do your straddles and go side to side, forward, and see if it feels a little different. Try and keep those external rotators engaged as much as you can. And it's nice because it's a very gentle way of doing it, but if doing that still makes your hips hurt, then you might want to look into what's going on with your hips. It might be something, you know, maybe from the impact of running, I don't know. But if you're having that much pain, it's definitely something to look into. Carla, lovely Carla. I think I have really tight hip flexors. Deep in the front split, my thigh muscles shake. Find it hard to bear the uncomfortable feeling. Oh, you're not alone, Carla. It's terrible pain, I can't relax. Well, I think you might be going a little bit too deep if it's really that awful. My guess is, and I sound like a broken record, I'm guessing that you're not doing an awful lot of active flexibility training, so using, building strength in your flexibility. Sometimes if you are newer to doing splits, or if you've had any injuries in the past, or you haven't been working out a ton and you start doing splits, if your muscles are not super strong and stable and you start going into something that's a deep passive stretch like splits, so gravity's pulling you down and you're in this really uncomfortable position and you're taking a muscle that's already not very strong, you're starting to stretch it pretty intensely, the muscle is going to freak out. And it's just like, if you're like cozy in your house and then someone suddenly drops you in ice water, you're going to freak out. It's the muscle has that same reaction there. You're like, we're doing fine. Why are you doing this to me? That kind of reaction. So sometimes you have to back off a little bit and ease the muscles into the idea of the split a little bit more. So maybe don't go as deeply. Maybe work on your splits lying on your back, pulling your leg in like I was just doing. Do a lot of lunges and hamstring stretches. Work on the active flexibility, straightening the leg, pushing with the downstairs butt. Do a lot more to ease your body into the splits. So just with stretching, you don't want to think just like, push through the pain, kind of like, Rocky Balboa, hardcore, kick ass, go till you puke. It's a good approach if you're doing CrossFit, but it really doesn't work for stretching. If your body is screaming at you in a stretch, back off. Find a different approach. Because what will happen is if you're in that kind of reaction, a little bit of shaking is okay, but if it's like dramatic shaking and pain and it's unbearable, what's happening is your whole body's going into like that fight or flight, panic, oh my God, we're all gonna die kind of reaction. And the muscles will all tighten up and you'll end up stretching your connective tissue, the little things that connect the muscles to the bones or connect the bones to the other bones, you're going to stretch that instead of the muscle. And those are the things, like I was saying earlier, that once stretched, never go back. You don't want to stretch your connective tissue. So the idea of stretching is you have to approach this as a way of allowing your body to open up naturally. You have to allow it to happen. Keep allowing it to happen instead of making it happen. If a stretch isn't working for you, take a step back, think of other ways to approach it. Maybe your body isn't ready to do splits right now. Strengthen it, stabilize it, do hamstring stretches, do hip stretches. Then maybe later, after you've been doing that for a while, put them all together and try the split. Be nice to yourself. Life's too short to be mean to yourself. All right. Also for Carla, I really struggle with pointing my toes. I barely can make a straight line and they always tend to bend in. How can I prevent that? And what are good stretches to improve flexibility? So again, I'm going to give you some active flexibility stuff. There are like foot stretchers. So things that will take your foot and push it down. And you can use your hands to do that. You take your hands and push into your point and curl the toes under, and that feels nice and that's good. You can also do it this way where you're kneeling and you bring your knee up and curl the toes under, and that will give you a little bit of stretch here as well. And the more you bring your knee up, the more it will get into the toes. So the knee is down, you're getting it more right in this part of the foot. The knee goes up, you get it more into the toes. Those are good, but the problem is that as you're saying, if you're tending to sickle, so that when you point your toe, so you can see it there, yeah. So if you point your toe and it tends to go in like this, and then you try to do all those other stretches, it's going to keep on turning in. So the way to counteract that is you want to strengthen the muscles in the outside of your calves, right along here, and the stronger these get, the more they're going to pull your foot out into the correct position. So a really great way of doing that. I can set this up so you can see it. So you're going to sit with both legs straight out in front of you. Okay, good. And you can put your finger or a little pillow or something in between your ankle bones. So you want to get your ankle bones glued together. And I'm going to squeeze my finger with my ankle bones, and then just try to separate the big toes. And I don't have a huge range of motion there. You can see there's a little bit of separation between the toes. I'm trying to keep the foot as pointed as possible, and I'm squeezing these muscles in the outside here. And I swear, you do 20, 30 of those, you're gonna really start to feel this outside muscle working. And that's gonna gradually start to correct that tendency to sickle with the foot. It's also really good just for your stability, your ankle stability. If you tend to pronate with the foot, this will help with that. All right, Jana's next. Whenever I'm moving and concentrating, for instance, in my aerial routine, my legs forget to stay straight. Silly legs. Is this a stretching thing? How can I teach myself to keep my legs straight and concentrate on something else like choreography? That's an excellent question. So as movers, we're often doing many things at the same time. So I did belly dance for many years, and I'm going to use a belly dance analogy. So in belly dance, we talk about layering different movements for technique. So your hips will go up, 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 up. And then you want your belly to be going, burp, 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 and then you want your chest to be going, burp, 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 burp. So you're up, 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 and blue, blue, and burp, burp, burp. And if you just start trying doing all those things at once, it'll look like you're having a seizure. So the only way to do it is you practice just the hips forever, and just the belly for a really long time, and then the chest isolation, and you have to get to each one of those things so ingrained in your body that your body just does it. You don't have to think about it. So then you start the hips, you add the belly, you add the chest, one layer at a time. And your body has that muscle memory, so you don't even have to think about it anymore. Then you can think about, smiling and making sure your hands don't look like claws. So it's the same thing with extending your legs. Work on extending your legs all the time. Just, exercise where you have the leg out in front of you and you squeeze that muscle and you engage and you point that leg, squeeze it and relax, and squeeze and relax. And you can do the same thing lying on your back. I keep coming back to these same exercises because, they're good. Extend, squeeze, 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 and relax. It's surprising how much work it is just to hold your legs straight in the air. And if your leg doesn't straighten in the air when you're lying on your back like that, if that isn't easy for you, it's going to be really hard when you're also hanging upside down in the air with one arm behind your head, you know? So just focus on that. And once that gets easier for you, where it's just second nature, your legs just straighten, bam, then it will get easier for you in the air because your body will already have that hardwired in. I will say this as well. I notice a lot in aerial that people tend to lift their legs kind of bent and then try to straighten them once they get up. And this is much more difficult than straightening your legs at the bottom and bring them up straight. Unless you're I mean, that's hard on your abdominal strength, your core strength. So if you're not able to lift your legs straight from the very beginning in a straddle up or a pike up, bend your legs fully, then fully extend them. But the straddle up where they're kind of sort of extended and then you're trying to straighten them at the top, that's what makes it much more difficult to find that full, beautiful extension. Make a choice. Are they bent or are they straight? And if you don't have the strength to lift them completely straight, do bend and then straighten at the top. My 2 cents. Nina has a tight lower back. She has difficulty leaning forward. She sent me a picture. Thank you so much, Nina. I appreciate that. So sitting here, very tight going forward. Again, this is a very common problem. So if you're sitting here and you feel like you have a difficult time sitting up straight and the body doesn't want to go forward, same pike stretch. It's somewhat of a hip problem. It's more of a lower back problem. A lot of times this area of the lower back is very, very tight, especially if you don't have super strong core muscles. And just the way that the body is built, if you're walking, sitting, engaged in life, your lower back is supposed to be held up by the strength of your lower abs. And a lot of times we don't have super strong lower abs because we sit too much and our abs start to kind of atrophy a little bit. So then when we're up and we're walking around, instead of holding ourselves up from here, we're holding ourselves up from our lower back. Now, I don't know if this is the case. I haven't worked with you enough, but this is especially true of people who are hyperlordotic. If you tend to stick out your butt, then that will really tighten up those lower back muscles too, for sure. Because then all of your body weight is just sitting there right in your lower back. So what I recommend is to start to think about loosening up your lower back. And one of the best ways of doing it is to do rotations and lateral bending. So do twists. And as soon as you do that, you're going to start to feel those lower back muscles, the obliques, all of this stuff in here. And do lots of twists. Do active twists, then add the arm, do a little bit of a passive twist. You can bend up and over to the side, go side to side, do movements, go still and hold it. But do a lot of movement that's trying to twist and bend in the lower back. If your lower back is really tight, you'll notice that as you start doing this, you're going to want to use your shoulders, you're going to want to use your upper body, you're going to want to use your legs, anything to stay out of that tight cranky region. So keep the movement small at first and really try to isolate just this part of the body. And I think that will help because you did also send me a picture, I believe, of your no, I'm sorry, that wasn't you. It was a different one. Yes. But next person also has stiff hips and lower back. So if you're able to get your legs all the way out in front of you, you're able to open your legs all the way, but you still can't go forward, then that's a problem mostly of the tightness in the lower back, generally. So try that and see if it helps. All right. 2 people with the same question in a row. Now we have Sabine. Sabine. You're very welcome, Sabine. Here's my question. I have very stiff hips. Your turnout, by the way, is lovely. Sabine has sent me a picture of her her straddle split, and it's pretty much flat. It looks great. It's really, really nice. So congrats on that. I can tell you've been working on it. Splits and plies. They lock, your hips lock. I didn't see a picture of your plie, so I'm not really sure how to comment on that. I'm not sure where it's locking. But your lunge, so yeah, your lunge does look a little bit tight. I want to make sure I'm understanding your question, but it seems like you have a question about the hip flexors. And how the hip flexors can affect your splits, which if you have tight hip flexors, it's definitely going to make doing splits really hard, especially if you're trying to square them properly. And you say that you're having to really try to fight to keep the hips square, and that's fine. Fight. It's not easy all the time for everybody. So it's a fight worth fighting. And the more that you fight it, the easier it will get, because what's going to happen is you're going to start to build those downstairs butt muscles. So like I was saying, if you are really tight in your hip flexors and you're really weak back here, then you're going to have difficulty opening up your hips and squaring your hips and splits. So you can try this. If you just stand, imagine I'm standing instead of kneeling. And I'm pretty hyperlordotic, so if I relaxed, then my hip flexors shorten and my butt sticks out. Everybody's a little bit different, but some people have this problem. Some people are a little tucked in and they're overly tucked. But you'll notice that if this muscle here is relaxed, this is just relaxed, and your lower abs are relaxed, then you can feel your body weight sitting into your hips, and your hips are tight. Now, if you try to engage this muscle, see if you can just find that muscle. It helps if you poke it. I know it looks really silly. So much of stretching looks silly, but that's all right. It's the end result we're focusing on. If you poke it just to try to get that muscle to wake up and squeeze it, and you can see that as I engage that muscle, I get this lengthening sensation through the front of the hip. You can actually see the hips start to open up here. So pushing from here, lengthening here, this gets longer. That's the same sensation that you want to feel when you're in your splits and your lunges. And the more that you can find that engagement through the downstairs butt and that lift in the abs, it's going to make all the difference in the world. And if those muscles aren't strong right now, just keep working on it. Just keep engaging those muscles. Keep using them. Do a lot of lunges. It's easier to find in a lunge than in the splits for sure. But every time you're in the splits, just keep working on it, keep fixing it, keep fixing it. The more you do it, the easier it will get. All right? Lucy. Lucy, in a straddle, I have pain on the inside of both knees. It's not the knee itself. Put my finger on a sinewy tendon or ligament. Yes, yes, Lucy, you're right. So what can happen sometimes, now I'm not going to guarantee this is the case for you, because I don't like to diagnose people via Facebook and internet. So this is a possibility and something you can look into, but I don't know for sure if this is your issue. But for a lot of times when people have pain right in here, when they're in their straddle and trying to lean forward or trying to open the legs, it's because the inner thigh muscle is glued to the hamstring. And muscles do get glued together sometimes, and apparently this is a pretty common one where these muscles can get glued together. They get glued together by the fascia, which is sort of the gooey sacs that hold our muscles and organs and tissues. And if you get dehydrated or you don't move around for a while, sometimes those, instead of being slippery and slidey and lubricated, they can get sticky and then they stick together. And then when you try to stretch, your hamstring is pulling on your inner thigh, which is pulling on your knee joint, which feels ouchy and it feels like a ligament or feels tight and crunchy. And the best way to deal with this is to have someone actually go in there and separate the muscles. So if you find someone who does structural integration or rolfing or even just deep tissue massage, sometimes they get it in there and massage it out. It actually works well if they massage you while you're in straddle. And I do this to my students. Sometimes I'll get in there and mess around a little bit. And sometimes you can actually get your hand in between those two muscles and just kind of loosen up and break it up. And it does really help. If that is the problem, it should help reduce the pain in the knees. Another potential source of the problem is if you have some rotation in the knee, and some people have that where this part of the leg is going this way and at the knee it starts to rotate and go that direction. Then that can also make the knees hurt in middle splits and straddle. And that's an issue that if it's really bothering you, you should look into getting some physical therapy or Pilates or something to try to work on not having that torque in your leg affect you as much. But definitely rolfing is really good for this stuff because a lot of these twists and torques and pulls in the body are from things getting stuck together. And once you unstick them, everything moves much more in a much more correct and aligned way. I did the whole rolfing session at one point. It was fantastic. Changed my life. Wonderful. My rolfer said he was organizing my body. That is what it felt like. Lucy. And last question. Sonia O. Does it make a difference to stretch more than once per day? And are shorter but more frequent sessions better than longer and less frequent sessions? Thanks. You're welcome. Well, I would say for back flexibility, I wouldn't stretch it more than once a day. It's really hard on the back to stretch, to warm up your back and do all that stretching more than once a day. I've had to do it for shows and stuff like that, and usually I'm pretty sore the next day. So I would say if you can do one session, this is the ideal. In the ideal world where you don't have to work and we're all just leisurely people and we have all the time in the world to structure our stretching routine, you would stretch for 2 to 3 hours at the same time of day, at least 3 days a week, up to 5 or 6 days a week. That would be the ideal. That's if you really want to make huge gains in your flexibility. Unfortunately, most of us don't have the luxury of being able to do that. So you get as close to that as you can. The body, training your body it's like training a horse or a dog or, certain small children. The consistency is so important. The body responds best. The muscles they have their little lizard brains. They have primitive little brains. I mean, they don't literally have brains, but they're connected to your nervous system in a way that it's like they all have these little individual lizard brains. And so you think about when you're trying to get a dog to learn a trick, you have to do it the same way every time. So I would say definitely one longer session per day is preferable. That way you're warming up your body, you're moving through the sequence of stretches. If you've always got to start with legs, hips, shoulders, back every time, because that by the time you stretch your back, you should have warmed up everything else in your body, because the back requires flexibility and every other part of your body. You can't stretch your back by itself. It's very unhealthy. Also, the consistency of sequence will help your body feel safe. You want your body to feel safe. Stretching is scary. It's scary for your mind, scary for your body. So the more consistent and measured and steady you are in the training, the more you're going to give your body that emotional reassurance that it needs in order to relax and allow that new range of motion to happen. So as best as you can, given your schedule, that is the ideal. So thank you guys. This is the first time I've done this. It's really fun. It's very exciting. You can continue to send questions to me via the Worldwide Splitters page. I'm going to post a new event every week. And under that, you can post all of your questions. You can also, if you get on Instagram, if you do #AskFitAndBendy, then I will know that you want to ask me a question, and I can look at your photo there too. It's really helpful if you post photos of what you're working on, if it's specific to a stretch, so I can see a little bit where your body's at or what it is that you're talking about, because otherwise it's kind of hard to, I can only give you very general answers. And please follow up. I also do offer Skype lessons and consultations if you want a little bit more one-on-one, go deeper into some issue, and you get a discount code if you're part of the Splitters Network. So yay, discounts. And thank you so much. Have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.